Hello, everybody.
Sally, want to grab it? Got it there. Thanks.
Right. Good morning, good evening, everyone. And we're delighted to be here on a very hot day in Jerusalem. And before we begin with introducing the speakers, etc., Peter, you wanted to speak. You wanted to say some words.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Hanna for agreeing to moderate this session. She is in Jerusalem. I'm not. I'm speaking to you from Toronto in Canada, where I'm visiting grandchildren. My daughter doesn't get a mention, of course. It's only the grandchildren. But I will be back in Jerusalem for the next in-person Praying Together in Jerusalem. And the next in-person Praying Together in Jerusalem is the first Thursday in August. And that will be in the middle of our Elijah Interfaith Summer School. And we are hoping that many, many of you will not only join us for Praying Together in Jerusalem, but will join us for the summer school. Tali is going to put into the chat the link, and you are all welcome to join us. On the one hand, it's a little bit of a disappointment that we can't do an in-person summer school because of the insecure situation here in the Holy Land. But on the other hand, the fact that we can be on Zoom means that wherever you are in the world, you can and are welcome to join us. I'm looking at Trevor, who's just joined us. He'll be joining us at the summer school as well. Many of you have been and will be, and we just hope that you'll have, we know it's a wonderfully uplifting, educational, and also, I will say, social experience. We make friends at the summer school. And Heather, whom I see there, Heather's participated both in person and on Zoom. And I can tell you that the Zoom part of her experience was the hook to bring her back in person. We did form a community even on Zoom. So if anybody was hesitant in joining because it's not in person, take it as an opportunity rather than a disadvantage. Be part of it. We were going to do a further, deeper study of what it means to be fully human. And we do hope that you will all join us. And now it's my pleasure to hand back to Hanna. And I'm going to ask Hanna if you would make sure you're in the center of the screen to introduce our speaker and then to lead us for the rest of today's gathering. Thanks, Hanna.
Thank you, Peter. So first of all, I think I need to, first of all, thank you to the Fuchsberg Center for hosting us. And I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Rabbi Joel Levy, who is the Rosh Yeshiva of the Conservative Yeshiva in Jerusalem, where he studied and taught for many years. He received rabbinic ordination from Rabbi David Hartman and has served as the rabbi of Kol Nefesh Masorti, the UK's first fully egalitarian traditional synagogue since 2000. And I would just, for myself, would like to say that Rabbi Joel, when he speaks and when he teaches, the message goes into my heart, and I'm sure it will go into your hearts as well. I still remember when you spoke before the festival of Purim about the book of Esther. Do I remember what you said? No, but that's because I don't have a retentive memory, and it's getting worse as I get older. However, the memory and the impression of what you said, the profundity stayed in my heart. And I'm so looking forward to hearing you speak about the Meiri. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Hanna. So I've got about 20 minutes, and that's not enough to do justice to this particular thinker. But I'm going to take a little slice of the aspect of the Meiri's work that he is best known for, perhaps, which is in his writings about non-Jews. The Meiri he was born in the middle of the 13th century. He's from Provence. And he was a moneylender by trade. And we don't know a huge amount about his life. We do know that his works were lost for many years and rediscovered at the beginning of the 20th century when they kind of re-emerged on the halachic scene. and people are taking them very, very seriously now. He wrote a commentary on 35 tractates of the Talmud that was lost for hundreds of years and then which re-emerged at the beginning of the 20th century. And we're going to look today at some of his writings about non-Jews, and I want to wash some dirty laundry in public, which is always a bad thing to do. But I hope I'm amongst friends, both online and in person. But because I want to talk about the problem that the Meiri addressed in his writings and the radical change that he proposed in Judaism's understanding of its relationship with non-Jews, and particularly around his relationship with Christianity. And I also personally owe a debt of gratitude to the Meiri, because the way he reframes and rethinks about Judaism's relationship with other religions creates a category which is basically the way I understand what I do in my life. Creates a category of thinking about what it means to be a religious person that transcended the particular tradition that the Meiri was writing from within. And that's basically the way I think about religion and about my religious life. And we'll come back to that in the end, about the debt of gratitude that I think I feel that I owe within the Jewish tradition to the writings of the Meiri. Judaism, just to go back to think about Judaism's relationship with non-Jews. Judaism, there are books of the Bible which are very, very hostile to idolatry. The book of Deuteronomy is ferociously iconoclastic. People are put to the sword very easily for their worship of idols, and the following up stories which are Deuteronomistic also have that same spirit of iconoclasm and violence. And Judaism retained that sense that idolatry was impossible, incoherent, madness, had to be obliterated. Don't make peace with the people of the country that you find yourself in, wipe them out. Judaism's relationship with idolatry is one that it's yet to engage with in a serious way. Meaning, I think that in the same way as there's been a Christian-Jewish dialogue since the Second Vatican Council for 60, 70 years, and Christianity has thought about its relationship with Judaism profoundly, I think Judaism should have a similar conversation with the world of paganism. And that would be a very painful conversation for it to engage in, and it hasn't started yet, because I don't believe that Judaism has yet acknowledged the problem. But that's not what I wanted to speak about today. That would be an interesting place to go. But the iconoclastic instinct carried on into the period of Judaism is under the Romans. And the Romans were into idols. Idols were on every street corner, in every bathhouse. And Judaism had to accommodate and find a way, given that it was that the Jewish population in Israel, at least, was under occupation and had to coexist with Roman culture. Huge efforts were made to find a way of coexisting with idolatry and living alongside idolatry without engaging to Deuteronomistic iconoclasm. And a whole book of the Mishnah and then the Talmud is devoted to finding excuses for why it is you shouldn't destroy your neighbor's idol, and explaining why it is that Jews could coexist with Roman culture. But at the same time as finding a way of coexisting, Judaism was also preserving its basic hostility towards Roman religion. And Jews were, what happens in the book of, in Masechet Avodah Zarah, in the Mishnah, is that Judaism goes from being openly aggressive in the book of Deuteronomy to being passive aggressive in the Mishnah. And that passive aggression is with us now. At its best, it's passive aggressive. meaning that if you're a member of the Christian clergy walking around the streets of Jerusalem, you might find that that passive aggression veers over into aggression, and it's extremely unpleasant because Jews have power now. But the passive aggression was preserved with a kind of hostility which was kept under the surface. Jews knew they were right and the idolaters were wrong. They knew they had to coexist with idolaters, and they found modes of coexistence and modes of getting on with and doing business with. But at the same time, that basic hostility was an undercurrent of Jewish life for the last 2,000 years, and it was transferred from Roman culture to Christian culture, meaning many Jews don't go into churches still, and that's because there's a kind of sometimes tacit assumption that those are houses of idolatry, and the hostility, the passive aggressive hostility, exists within the Jewish community, and it's not talked about so much. It's not that Jews are taught those values, but we even have students at the yeshiva who've never been into a church, at the Conservative Yeshiva who've never been into a church because they were told that was forbidden for them as Jews. So the work that the Meiri did was, living in Provence in the 13th century, was an attempt to address the hostility of the Jewish community towards Christianity. And the Jews had coexisted with Christian culture in Spain and France for a very long time. There were ad hoc rules that allowed them to do business with Christians and to sometimes eat with Christians. And so the halachic issues of how to live in a shared space had been resolved a long time ago. But the halachic explanations as to why one would be prepared to do business and to live alongside Christians and to not be openly aggressive, the halachic explanations allowed for preserving the basic hostility. There's a principle in the Mishnah that there are things that you need to do in order to look after the non-Jews, mipnei eva, lest they should hate you and have hostility with you, or mipnei darkei shalom, because of the ways of peace. But those ad hoc explanations as to why one ought to be civil to your Christian neighbors were only ever ad hoc, and they allowed you to preserve your basic hostility. I remember once I had a conversation with a neighbor who had grown up within the very frum community, very Orthodox community, who said that he left that world because when he learned that the reason why you would save a non-Jew on whom a house had fallen on the Sabbath, the reason why you would dig them out was because of mipnei darkei shalom, was because otherwise the goyim will hate us, the non-Jews will hate us. And he said, look, the halakha is that you're supposed to rescue Jews and non-Jews, but you rescue Jews because they're kin. You rescue non-Jews because otherwise the non-Jews will really hate us. He said that the explanation for why I'm doing the right thing sometimes is corrosive. The explanation for why I'm doing the right thing can be corrosive. Like, I want to rescue the non-Jew on whom bricks fall on Shabbat because it's the right thing to do, not because otherwise they'll hate me. And the Meiri, as far as I know, is the first person who explains and reframes the relationship with non-Jews in positive terms as opposed to ad hoc terms. So he explains what it is that we have in common with Christianity and with other monotheistic religions, in a way which I think is profound, revolutionary, and changes the way that Judaism, I think about my religion, my relationship to Judaism as well. So I'd like to jump into a couple of case studies. If you're online, you're not going to see them, but I'll read out the bits that are significant. A couple of case studies. This is a recurring theme in the Beit HaBechira, in the Meiri's main writings, but we're just going to look at a couple of different cases. Okay, so on page 2, if you have a copy there, they're asking about whether you're allowed to exploit, abuse other people. And there's exploitation in a business sense, and there's exploitation through language. We're not going to go into exactly what that means, but there is, as part of that conversation in the Talmud about whether you can exploit people, Rabbi Hanna Barei de Rav Idi, Rabbi Hanna, the son of Rav Idi, says, "Mai dichtiv v'lo tonu ish et amito." What's the meaning of the verse in Leviticus 25? You shall not each person should not mistreat or abuse his amito, his colleague, and he interprets amito as am she'itcha, a person of a nation who is with you, b'Torah or mitzvot, in the world of Torah and mitzvot. Al tonehu, you're not allowed to abuse him. Meaning, there are certain forms of exploitation, abuse that you can apply to people who are not your brothers in Torah and mitzvot. So someone like the bonds of kinship that come through participation in the covenant of Israel create responsibilities that don't apply to non-Jews. And so amito am she'itcha, someone who's with you, that's the person you're allowed to exploit. But you are allowed to take advantage financially and verbally out of people who are not one of your nation, says Rav Hanna. Now that gets passed down halachically. That gets passed down in the tradition. The Meiri reframes that as follows: Kol shegadur b'drachim adatiyim. Everyone who is bound in the way of religion, harehu bichlal ona'ah, he falls into the category of the prohibition of exploitation. Of de'elilim einam bichlal achva, but idol worshippers, they're not within the realm of brotherhood. Kadela chalalan bedin ona'ah, in order to include them in the prohibition on exploitation. Haba'a derech mekach umemka, which refers to buying and selling. Klal amru chachamim. Our rabbis, our sages taught a general rule: lo tonu ish et amito. You shouldn't mistreat a person from your nation. Am she'itcha b'Torah u'mitzvot al tonehu. A member of a nation who's with you in Torah and mitzvot, you shall not exploit him. Something radical just happened. You just have to catch it. What he just did was to say that anyone who is gadur, fenced in b'drachim hadatiyim, in the ways of religion, is itcha b'Torah u'mitzvot, is with you in Torah and mitzvot. Meaning for the first time, I think, a Jewish thinker looks at another religion and says, they're doing the same thing we're doing. They're involved in the same project. He can look at a Christian and say, they're involved in the same project that I'm involved in. A Muslim, they're involved in the same project that I'm involved in. What does that mean, they're involved in the same project? It means that the basic architecture of a religious life, whether you're a Jew, a Christian, or a Muslim, or probably any other religion, is similar. I'm going to finish, and then we'll do questions. We will have time for questions afterwards. So the architecture of a religious life, a life of ritual, a life of piety, a life of set of texts, a life of moral aspiration, a life of hashgacha pratit, of believing that God is watching you and that therefore there's an aspiration for good. I'm trying to be good. I'm on the life struggle towards being a good person. Meiri looked at his Christian and Muslim friends and said, well, they're doing that. Whatever that is, they're doing it. They are also God-fearing. They are also people who want to try and do the right thing. And the Meiri is the first person in the Jewish tradition who says that, well, if you're doing that thing, you're amiti, you're one of my nation, you're my kinsman. To the extent that I would then say you fall into the category of people towards whom I have to behave with decency, because partly, I'd imagine it's partly a midah keneged midah, a measure for measure, meaning if a Christian or a Muslim is aspiring to be a good person, and I'm aspiring to be a good person, the chance of him trying to be good and therefore being nice to me are the same as the chance of me trying to be good and then being nice to him or her. And the Meiri is the first person to say, well, that changes everything, because it was our mistrust, our distrust of paganism was a moral problem. It wasn't a theological problem. The Meiri never gets into the question of theology. He doesn't get into whether Jesus is God or Jesus is not God or stuff like that. As far as he's concerned, those theological questions are a distraction from the core question of, are you a religious person? And are you gadur b'drachim hadatiyim? Are you constrained by the ways of commitment to a religious tradition? And if you are, says the Meiri, then you're in my club. That's one example. I'll bring one more example. Then if you flip over the page, then I've got a few more minutes. The second question is about returning lost property. And again, there's a verse in the Torah that says explicitly in Deuteronomy 22, "L'kol avedat achicha," that you have to return lost property to your brother. Now, returning lost property is like, you have to really go out of your way. If I see a sheep wandering that doesn't belong to anybody, and I have to ascertain who it belongs to and then schlep over to the next hillside to take it back to the person who lost it. So that's hard work. That's not like stealing. You're not allowed, the Talmud says you're not allowed to steal from pagans. But if a pagan loses his sheep, you don't have to schlep over to the next hillside to take it back to him. And if a pagan gave you the wrong change in a shop, then you don't have to correct the change. You're allowed to take the profit. So those are horrid. Those are like, discriminatory laws that appear in the Talmud. And the Meiri again reworks those laws in the bold section at the bottom of the page on page 3. Ha kol shehu me'amamin hagedurim b'darkei hadat. But anyone who is of the nations which are bounded in the ways of religion, v'ovdei elohut al ezet tzad, people who worship God in whatever way they do. Like, that's amazing. Anybody who worships God in whatever manner people worship God, even should their belief be far from the way that we believe, they don't fall into that category of people who we don't have to return lost sheep to. Rather, they fall into the category of Jews for this purpose. They are Jews for the purposes of returning lost property. Whether that's referring to a lost sheep or to the wrong change being given in the shop, or with any other case with no distinction made between a Jew and a non-Jew. So again, he says that here he's saying it even more explicitly. He says, it sounds crazy. A non-Jew is a Jew for the purposes of moral behavior. If the non-Jew is Gudur b'darkei hadat, if he's a religious person, then all these discriminatory laws don't apply. And I should treat that person with the same decency and with the same sense of achva, of companionship, of brotherhood, as I would with my Jewish fellow. Now, I'm terribly moved by this. I suppose because it's like a pivot point in Judaism when it starts to get its head around. It's reframing not just halachically in terms of the practical side of things, but also on a more profound level, sort of looking beyond the tradition and seeing a big world outside the tradition. I think all religions have the potential to drift into a form of religious narcissism, or maybe even every religion comes from a place of religious narcissism, meaning, and that's partly what's great about religion, is because it's like, it's us and it's our customs and the way we do things and our language and our tunes and our music and our, so there is a profound sense of belonging that comes out of being part of an ancient religious tradition. But to be able to look beyond the end of your own nose, to be able to see your Christian neighbor or your Muslim neighbor, and to say, they're doing what I'm doing. It looks very different. Emunatam rechakam emunati. Their faith is different from my faith, but it's cognate. They have the same architecture to their life. They have the same religious architecture. I don't need to ask questions of their exact theology because I can see their piety. What the Meiri says is, look at the outcomes of religious life and look at the architecture of religious life, and don't get lost in the details of theology. Now, that's kind of it's an interesting approach, but it's an approach which is kind of in some ways anti-philosophical or anti-theological. And that is broadly speaking the approach that I carry into my religious life, meaning I remember, spending time in various yeshivot where the whole effort of the yeshiva was to try and convince me that Judaism was sui generis, that Judaism was unique, and that the truth claims of Judaism were unique. And if I could be convinced that the truth claims of Judaism were superior to the truth claims of any other religion, then I would be committed to Judaism. And that totally left me cold. I had no intellectual connection to that at all, or religious. The religious connection began for me when someone said to me, being religious is ubiquitous. Being religious is a normal thing for humans to do. That's a normal thing for humans to do. And if it's a normal thing to do, then maybe I should try it. Meaning, like, maybe that's just what humans do. That's what it means to be a human, is to try in language to articulate not just what is, but what could be, or what might be, or what we're committed to, or our vision of the way the world ought to be. Like, maybe that's part of what it means, the fabric of what it means to be a human being. And if that strikes me as being a more compelling reason to be a religious Jew than the argument that Judaism is sui generis, is unique and superior. And I want to live in a world where religious people think like the Meiri. I want to live in a world where religious people think that if you're following a life which seems to have the same architecture as me, even though your religious practice is utterly different from mine and your belief is different from mine, I want to be able to call you brother and sister. I want to be able to look at you and call you brother and sister. Can I have one more minute, or do you want me to finish that? Yeah. So I travel quite a lot, and it's my great shame is to travel on airplanes too much. But I was once in the and I try when I travel, I like to daven, to pray in the interfaith lounges of airports. Partly because I actually like being in interfaith lounges. I think they're like really interesting places, and they're sort of meeting places. Sometimes those meetings are great. Sometimes those meetings are not so great. And I just end with maybe a story about a great and a terrible interfaith encounter in an airport lounge in Heathrow years ago. And it was in the morning. It was time for shacharit, And I went in, and there was a whole big Muslim prayer going on there with people davening, people praying with the Muslim prayer in there as well. And I went in and I started putting on my tefillin and getting myself ready to do my praying in the lounge. And a very young Muslim guy came up to me, and he said, "You have to take your shoes off. You have to take your shoes off." And I said, "You take your shoes off if you're in a mosque, but this is an interfaith space, and Jews keep their shoes on to pray." And he went away, and I could see him getting more and more frustrated. And he came up to me again and said, "You have to take your shoes off. This is a prayer space. You have to take your shoes off." And I said, "Look, I'm sorry, this is an interfaith space. And I think you should pray with your shoes off, but I pray with my shoes on." The truth is, I do sometimes pray with my shoes off. I think I was doing it because it was a principle. The principle was, I do it my way and you do it. Anyway, at third time, fourth time, he got very angry, and he stormed off. He got really furious with me, and it was like he was really upset. He couldn't accept the idea that I was praying with my shoes on, because this was like a mosque, because everyone was praying there. And an elderly Muslim guy got up, and he comes up to me while I'm praying, and he just totally puts his arms around me and says, "You're my brother." He says, "You're my brother. We're brothers. You're praying your way, and I'm praying my way, but we're brothers." And that was we just hugged each other, and it was a very, very profound experience for me. And I think it was the language of the Meiri. It was the language of seeing beyond the differences into brotherhood. And I think for me, I'm embarrassed sometimes that the monotheistic religions are in conflict with each other. I'm like, it's a shame. I feel shamed by the conflict between our peoples, and we need to just rethink. We need to rethink. And for me, the Meiri gave me a tool to rethink and to reframe how I understand the difference between what it means to be a Jew or a non-Jew, or all those boundaries, I think, dissolve when the Meiri says that religious people are kin through their practices. I'll call it that. Is that right? Let's get it.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. I have 2 questions, and I'm conflicted whether to share a story that happened to me in Bangkok airport. I'll just tell you quickly. It was the Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, and of course, light is one of the basic subjects of this series. And I was with my friend Tirza. We had been performing in Australia, and we needed to light the Hanukkah, the menorah with the candles. And the only place in Bangkok airport where one could light a candle was in the smoking room, which they had, which there were several. So we tentatively entered the smoking room. There were about 30 men puffing away, on their cigarettes. And we were the only women in there. We took out our Hanukkah, which was, it was in the shape of a bottle top. So it fitted into any bottle that you could find. It was great Hanukkah. And along came several men and said, "What are you doing? Can we join you in?" And we explained that we're bringing light, and they wanted to join us. And I remember saying the blessing, and they said amen or amen or whatever. It was a very beautiful experience. Thank you. I'm taking the moderators.
You have that right.
Joel, I have 2 questions before opening it up. One is, if the Meiri's work had not been lost, do you really think that that such a minority opinion would have become mainstream? And then again, what is the place of minority opinions in Judaism? Not very high.
No. I think it's a dangerous position to take. The Meiri's understanding is dangerous. There's a price. There's a price to pay for saying that Christians and Muslims are my brothers in Torah and mitzvot. There's a price. The price is around weakening the boundaries around your own community and your sense of your own superiority. And are we prepared to pay the price? Now, I would say that while Judaism was a persecuted minority in diaspora struggling to survive, if you were up to your armpits in mud in the Pale of Settlement, the one thing that kept you going was probably a supercilious sense of religious superiority to your neighbors. And that was a mechanism for survival. Like, you know, that we thought we were different from our neighbors, and that we had to preserve ourselves at every cost, and that we were all those things are buttressed by the sense that you're not kin with your neighbors. You're not kin with your neighbors. And if we could just stop persecuting each other, maybe we can relax a bit and just drop those walls a little bit and realize we're the same. Like maybe if the fear could be dissolved somewhat, then we could let go of some of those more aggressive religious motifs, and then the position of the Meiri can become more normative. But you know, the Middle East is a place where fear is always dressed as violence, and I guess that's true for human civilization in general. You know, when we see people being aggressive, it's often a manifestation of fear. And there's a lot of scared people in the Middle East. There's a lot of scared people around the world. A lot of scared Jewish people. That's not a great environment for anyone lowering their guard. So what would it, like, I don't know, it's a chicken and egg problem, but, you know, we have to hold on to our dreams for living in a world where we do lower our guard and where we recognize each other as kin.
Thank you. That's beautiful, to hold on to our dreams. Would anyone like to comment, first in the room and then on Zoom?
Clear. It's just a quick question. Would the Meiri, at his period in France, would he have known anyone who he would have considered idolatrous? Is the goal of this to include one group of people, or is this to include all of his neighbors?
So there are academics who claim that that Meiri didn't think it was all Christianity, and I think it's actually wrong, because the claim Rabbi Bleich claimed that he was only talking about a weird Christian sect, but he wasn't really talking about all Christians. But I think the powerful, and that's rejected by Moshe Halbertal, who wrote a book recently about the Meiri, who says that he thinks Bleich is completely wrong. But so I think it's wrong too. I think it's wrong because the Meiri isn't discussing what's idolatrous. He's not really interested in Christian theology. He doesn't really get into the question of idols. He's more interested in religious anthropology. He's interested in who are religious people. So I think that's the shift for me. The shift, like, it doesn't, like he says, emunatam rechokam emunatenu, like their faith is different from our faith. I don't think the Meiri gives a damn. That's not it. For him, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Meaning, is my neighbor mean? Is my neighbor horrible? Like, I think if you grew up in a kind of closed religious community, never meeting people of a different religious tradition, then you might be able to entertain the idea that, I don't know, that people from a different religious tradition are evil, or they have propensities to weird sexual practices, or they'll steal your money, or whatever it is. And then, but you know, I grew up in a little village in Wales. We were the only Jews in the village. Everyone was really nice to us. They were really nice. Like, now that may be, I was very lucky, but I didn't grow up with harboring a sense that my Christian neighbors were going to clobber me. I didn't grow up with that. And the Meiri grows up in a world where what he's saying is Christians behave as well as Jews. The Christians who I know behave as well as the Jews do. Well, that's a bit of a shock, because everything we say about idolaters is that they're horrid. So it's the encounter. Like, I think one of the reasons why I think interfaith dialogue is so affecting is that you meet nice people, you meet good people, you meet like pious, moral, committed, sensitive people. And that's like, well, that can rock your world. That can rock your world. And it creates a huge cognitive dissonance. I remember I was once at an Elijah Project event, and there was a Hindu speaker who was speaking in Israel. I can't remember her name, I'm sorry. And she was speaking, and I was sitting there with a bunch of boys who'd come straight out of yeshiva. And we were talking about her life and her practice, and she said, and they said, do you use idols as part of your practice? And she said, yes, and I brought them with me to Israel. And the three of us were in yeshiva at the time. We started looking at each other, and I knew what they were thinking. What were they? They were thinking, am I halachically obliged to kill this person? That's what they were thinking. They were thinking, does the halakha oblige you to kill an idolater who just confessed to idolatry, who brought an idol into the land of Israel? And the most shocking thing about this woman was that she was delightful. She was delightful. She was sensitive. She was moral. She was a meditator. We all had what to learn from her. It was shocking. So we were, on the one hand, I could see these boys thinking, my tradition says this is despicable. And on the other hand, the person sitting in front of us is exemplary. And that is shocking. David Hartman, who's my teacher, said that the most shocking thing for him was studying at Fordham, because he'd grown up in a closed Orthodox community where he assumed that non-Jews were bad, and he suddenly realized that they were good. He said that was a life-changing experience. Yeah. Don't know if that answered the question. It was a stab.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? We need to move along a little, but we should definitely have room for a couple of quick questions and answers. Yeah. Yes. Heather. Yes.
It always gets to the question that I have about religion, which is, what is it for? So, does it exist in order that we're nice to each other, which is on one hand, or does it exist in order that we worship God, which is kind of the other balance? And so the discovering that all religions, they're actually quite nice people and we should be all nice to them, is on the does it exist to be nice to each other kind of end of the balance. And I wonder whether it is just a balance, or whether it comes down on one side or the other.
This is a big question, and I don't think I can answer it simply al regel echad, but from the Eiri's perspective, and probably also from mine, they're tied together. The reason why he trusts Christians is because they worship God. He doesn't think they're disconnected. He thinks they're connected. Says when I go out on the street, I want to know that the people around me think that God is watching them and aspire to worshiping God and being with God and need a life of moral aspiration because of their relationship with God. That's how I can feel safe on the street, says the Meiri. So it's because Christians worship God that they're my brothers and sisters. It's not because I'm just saying they're just nice. It's that their niceness is a manifestation of their faith. And so it's tied together. And I would hazard that part of the reason why religion is ubiquitous, we've never yet, anthropologists have yet found a culture, yet to find a culture that isn't shot through with ritual and with the divine, is because is because from the very beginning, the human quest for goodness was tied to theology. It was tied to God. And that those have not been unentwined until the last 5 minutes of human existence.
Mm.
And this is the experiment of seeing what humans are like without God is a new experiment that might go terribly wrong. There are dangers to leading a life with God as well, obviously, because of narcissism, because of thinking that I have unique access to God. But that's the flip side. Like, religious war and conflict is the flip side. But that's why we need courageous thinkers like the Meiri to kind of get us out of that kind of catch-22.
So what would he have said in the current world about being nice to, say, humanists?
We all hate the humanists. What are you talking about? I say that's an experiment. I think it's a fascinating experiment. We're yet to discover whether humanism is riding on the coattails of religion. We're yet to discover whether humanists can create ethically sustainable communities and transmit. Like, the religions are very, very good at transmitting morals. We're yet to see whether the humanist world can create the appropriate structures to transmit moral aspiration. But if they do, my guess is that it will start looking a little bit like religion anyway.
Yeah. Because
religion is about ritual and repetition and repeating over and over what I'm committed to. So I think we need that because we're forgetting machines. So if you're going to be committed to something, you need to say it over and over again. You have to repeat it. So when humanists start repeating what they're committed to, then that will look a little bit religious, and then it'll be easier to understand what they're getting at.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Yes.
So I've been brought in. Thank you. I just want to first of all say thank you to Heather for her question just now. It also reminds me of the issue that Alon always says, the Buddhists are the problem. Buddhism as a non-theistic religion, and maybe you started to describe that. And it did remind me a lot of what how you presented the Meiri's teaching reminded me of what the Dalai Lama also taught us, is that when you're on a religious quest, start within your own tradition. That's the starting point. And also Swamiji from Spain, who in this series just a few weeks ago described religion as like a house with many rooms, and you can choose which room you enter and also what your room looks like, how you decorate it once you get in there. But my real question was that you used the word idolatry a lot, and then you were talking about Christianity. And I just wondered whether you'd pull apart a little bit. Are you saying that the Meiri says that Christianity is one form of idolatry, or is he talking about Christians and idolaters? Or, you use the terms, I think, interchangeably in the presentation, and wondered if you could explain a little more.
Possibly. I don't think Judaism ever understood idolatry. I think it reacts negatively to it without ever thinking about it deeply. There's nothing profound in the book of Deuteronomy about idolatry. You just have to destroy it. It's seen as a kind of fetish as opposed to something serious. So just to premise this by saying that I don't think, if you want to understand idolatry, Judaism is definitely not the place to look. But the use of images and particularly graven images is problematic in primary Jewish sources. And without really analyzing things deeply, I think it's often the case that the hostility that we find towards the use of idols in the book of Deuteronomy gets passed down through the tradition in a passive-aggressive manner, without really articulating what we mean or what the problem is or exactly what is the issue. And the amazing thing about the Meiri is he just sidesteps that question. He just sidesteps the question. He doesn't get into nitty-gritty of particular Christian groups and their use of images or the use of engraved images. He just doesn't go there. He doesn't. That's not his question. His question is, do I have to behave morally? And the answer is yes. And that's radical from a Jewish perspective. That's radical. It's like, that's radical enough. It might be that you want something else, or that we want something else, or that we need to go back and think through the theology in a more profound way. But what the Meiri offers is just this coming at it from a different angle. And when you come at it from a different angle, it allows you to then create modes of interaction between Jews and non-Jews, which are not founded on distrust, or like, it's not that I'm smiling with one side of my face and then cursing them with the other behind their backs. Like, I don't think the Meiri wants to preserve that kind of passive hostility. I think he wants to let that go, because he wants to call people kin. And I think that's where I'm coming from as well.
Thank you very much for the questions and for the answers. And let's hope and pray that the Meiri's position will become stronger in Judaism in our days. Yes. Now we're going to move on to our prayer section, and I'm very happy to invite Reverend Jane. Now, Tally, should we move the mic over? How should we do this? What's the best way?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Jane Eesley. I work in the Methodist Liaison Office here in Jerusalem, and I represent the Methodist Church in this area. We don't have Methodist congregations here, but we work in ecumenical and interfaith ways. And so it is my privilege to offer a prayer in the Christian tradition. However, in deference to the whole community, I don't pray in the name of Jesus when I'm with people who don't believe in Jesus in that way. Just to be clear, I'm not going to do that. So that's against my belief of kin. So let us pray. Holy God, you have created us as your children to care for one another, to follow you, to recognize your holiness. We do so in such diverse ways. We honor the boundaries of our traditions. We seek to be faithful in the ways that we know you. We seek to be clear about what those boundaries are. And yet sometimes, God, we confess that we have lived out those boundaries so strongly as to exclude one another or not to see your image in our neighbor. Thank you for the witness of Meiri. Thank you for the breadth of his vision. Thank you for his generosity in recognizing your work in people who weren't of his tradition. May his legacy flourish in all of our traditions. May his witness to respect the ways that others practice, may that inspire each of us in our various ways, so that there may be human flourishing with recognition of your divinity. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Jane. That was beautiful. And now we're going to call Fadwa. Where, Hallie, can you find Fadwa? All right, so let's go. Is Sister Maureen online? All right, so perhaps we'll go to Sister Maureen, and then if Fadwa comes, we will surely invite her. So Sister Maureen is a beautiful soul who I really would be honored to meet one day in London or Jerusalem, and is the program director of the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University. She travels widely conducting seminars and lectures on spiritual development. Sister Maureen is going to share a meditation with us today and take our souls soaring high. Thank you.
She muted.
I need to... Oh, can you unmute? Sister Maureen, unmute.
Yes, I see.
Thank you.
So first, thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you to Rabbi Levy for the beautiful explanation and taking us into the theological depth of what it means to really fulfill the golden rule, actually. And if we wish to do that which is good and true and honor God, honor the divine, then in our prayers, we need those times of reflection, times of silence, where we can go within and really begin to touch the inner goodness that is at the heart of our being. We know that in human life we have many tendencies, but can I find the goodness that really can give me strength and can give healing? Because our world today needs healing. So let me go within and become aware that I'm more than my physical body. I am a soul, a being of light, a being of peace. Let me return to my original form as I was created. Peace is the inherent nature of all of us. Love is fundamental to our being. And in this awareness, I can make that connection with God, the one who is the source of peace, the source of love, the source of all truth. In that connection, I feel the presence of the divine, and I feel the gifts that God is giving me. I'm surrounded by divine peace, surrounded by divine love. And I feel refreshed spiritually. I feel that it's possible to remove fear and replace it with love. And this is not only for me, but it's to share with all my brothers and sisters, with the whole of humanity, and also with every creature on the planet, and with the elements of nature, to bring those healing vibrations, to know that God is there to help us in our task of healing those divisions, of seeing one another as souls, as children of God, to help us in bringing peace, the peace that all of us wish to see on our earth. It's time for a new vision, time for a new era according to the great wishes of God and of every human heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Maureen, so much. It's from your lips to God's ears. It's hard to come back to the world after you brought us to such a place of meditative relaxation. Now, did Fatwa come in? So we have Muhammad here, who's our oud player. But Muhammad, אתה יכול דקה של תפילה בערבית? תודה.
לא צריך תרגום. לא, 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 לא.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. صدق الله العظيم.
תודה רבה, Muhammad. תודה ממש. So I'm going to share a prayer as the Jewish prayer. Share a prayer that was written by Rabbi Tamar Elad Applebaum and Sheikha Ibtisim Mohammed. I've shared it before, and it's just so wonderful and says it all. God, Ivor, you could play. And yes, absolutely. And we're hoping that the music is going to reach you on Zoom much more, much better than it usually does, because Rabbi Joel, in addition to, he put us on to a new setting.
Music.
Yes, the music setting. So we're hoping that it's going to really work today, so that you'll be able to hear Ivor and Muhammad on the respective guitar and oud. I thank you. God of life, you who heal the brokenhearted, binding up our wounds, please hear this prayer of mothers. You did not create us to kill each other, nor to live in fear or rage or hatred in your world. You created us so that we can allow each other to sustain your name in this world. Your name is life, your name is peace. For these I weep, my eye sheds water. For our children crying in the night, for parents holding infants, despair and darkness in their hearts. For a gate that is closing, who will rise to open it before the day is gone? With my tears and with my constant prayers, with the tears of all women deeply pained at these harsh times, I raise my hands to you in supplication. Please, God, have mercy upon us. Hear our voice, that we not despair, that we will witness life with each other, that we have mercy one for another, that we will share sorrow one with another, that we hope together one for the other. Inscribe our lives in the book of life. For your sake, O God of life, let us choose life. For you are peace, your world is peace, and all that is yours is peace. May this be your will, and let us all say, Amen. So here we come to the end of the prayer section, and now I'll invite Ivor to sing.
Okay.
Go, please.
Okay. This is one interesting Israeli song. It was unusual because most songs often have a sort of boy-girl theme, and this one is Ani va'ata, you and I will change the world. Now, I suppose if the Ani is male, then the ata should have been va'at, and you female. So by leaving it as va'ata, it could just be two good friends. Ani va'ata, you and I will change the world. And it was sung by perhaps Israel's most famous male singer of the last 20 years, Arik Einstein. Arik spelt A-R-I-K, Einstein, you all know how to spell that, of course. But it's a very clever song. You and I will change the world, all will follow. Others have said it before, that doesn't matter, you and I will change the world. I do recommend you, if you have Spotify, look for Arik Einstein, A-R-I-K Einstein. He's got a very special sounding voice and some very nice songs. And it goes like this. Ani va'ata neshane et ha'olam. You can join if you know it. Ani va'ata az yavo kamo kulam. Amru et kodem v'lo neshane. Ani va'ata neshane et ha'olam. Ani va'ata ננסה להנחלה, יהיה לנו רע, אין דבר זה לא נורא. אמרו את זה קודם, זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. To me, that is one of the nicest songs written of its kind. I hope you liked it.
Yeah, thank you. Between that song and the Meiri, in minority opinions, we're one step nearer. Mohammed, please. So while Mohammed is playing, we'd like to invite everyone to stand up for a moment or two of silence with the music, and to reflect our gratitude, that we are able to be here in this privileged position of having plenty, while so many in our area of the world and other places in the world, people are so lacking. And may there be peace. May there be peace in this area, in Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Sudan, too many places to mention, unfortunately. And wishing all our American friends here a happy Independence Day. We won't talk about the waste of tea in the Boston.
ממש תודה.